Hey everyone, and welcome back to my channel. This is Erica with Confessions of a Homeschooler, and I am back today with another Tip Tuesday video. Today we're going to be talking about pulling your kids out and transitioning to homeschooling mid-year. So for a lot of people, that would be sometime around now where they have started out maybe at a public or other traditional schooling system and they want to pull their kids out and start homeschooling. So I have a few tips on how to make that transition a little bit easier for you, and also just some information that you might need to know before you decide to do that. So, all right, so the first thing that I want to talk about is knowing your state laws. That's always going to be the first thing that I bring up with homeschooling because it's a little bit different for each state. The requirements are different and all of that kind of thing. So the first thing you'll want to do is find out what is required with your state. You're probably going to have to fill out some kind of a withdrawal form from whatever school system you're in, and then you're probably also going to have to send in a notification of intent to homeschool as well. Or if you're going to do a combination of homeschooling and maybe like a state-sponsored options program or something, those requirements can be a little bit different as well. So just find out what is required from your school district, your state, and start there. That's a great way to do it. Most school districts are more than happy to help you, work all that out, figure out what you need to do, and those kinds of things. So you can do this process at any time of the year. I personally think it's a little bit easier if you do it at some kind of a natural break. So that's why I'm doing this video right now. After you're coming back from like your winter or Christmas break, there's a semester break, somewhere usually in there, or coming soon for you. And so that's usually or typically a good time to transition out of your school and into homeschooling if that's what you're wanting to do. So I like to try and make the transition as easy as possible. If you go home for break and everybody goes home for break and then you start up homeschooling, I think it's a little bit easier than if you are to just suddenly kind of pull them out. However, I've had talked to people who have done that before just based on various needs and that kind of thing, and it can work really whenever you need to do it. I just think if you're going to have a choice, maybe look for a normal break in the school year to make the transition a little bit easier. You may also be required to submit information to your school district and things like that. So when you're still kind of actively involved with them and having them help you with this process of transferring to homeschooling, it's a good time just to kind of handle all of that. Also, don't forget if there's any testing or evaluations that you're going to need to do, find out where they'll want you to send those and that kind of thing. And that, like I said, will vary per state. But it's just some things, just some logistics to consider before you do it, timing, and then what your state requirements are as far as filling out withdrawal forms and submitting tests and things like that. The other thing that I highly suggest you do is to discuss the decision, which I'm assuming you probably already have if you're at this point, with your spouse and also with your child. Now, there are tons of different reasons why people pull kids out of school. Sometimes they're having a fine experience there. They just have been called to homeschool and that's what's really on their heart, and they're just making the decision to do it mid-year, and that's totally fine. Sometimes they're having issues academically or socially, and sometimes it's just not feasible with just different family situations and things like that. So there's tons of different reasons for pulling your child out and homeschooling them mid-year, all of which are valid, and I think that hopefully this information will help you regardless of what your reasoning is. But just discuss it with your spouse, make sure everybody's on board, discuss it with your child so that they kind of know what to expect when the transition is coming, so it won't be just like kind of an abrupt decision that one day they were going to school and the next day, what, I'm homeschooling? I had no idea. You just want to make the transition as smooth as possible so everybody knows what to expect and knows what's coming, especially your child who the transition will probably be the hardest on. So just open lines of communication. You'll also want to make sure you get any records from your school. You'll want to just have a copy of probably their attendance and their hours and their grades and things like that you can keep for your homeschooling records, because since they won't be finishing out the school year, you'll just want to make sure you get whatever you can from them when you're getting ready to leave. That way you just have all that information at home and you can put it into your home records. So as far as just logistics go, one of the first things that you're going to want to do is obviously figure out what you're going to be doing as far as curriculum goes, what you're going to be using, and that will really be dictated quite a bit from what they were using and whether it was working from them or not. Some of the reasons you might be changing to homeschooling is because what they were doing in your other school system is not working for them. Maybe they were struggling in a specific subject, or maybe you particularly didn't like the curriculum they were using. So take all those things in consideration. I do have a whole video on how to choose curriculum and you know, what to pick and things like that, that can help you out. So I'll try and link that below. But one of the things that you're going to want to do to make the transition as smooth as possible just for the remainder of this year is just make sure, like if something really was working for them, maybe see if you can get a hold of that and they can continue doing that for that specific subject. If one subject wasn't working, research some information, try and find something else to try for that subject and start new with that. But if you can kind of do a mix of things that they did like, that was working, that will make the transition a little bit smoother for them, I think that will be really helpful, because they will have a mixture of some new things that they're excited about because something they were doing before maybe just really wasn't clicking with them, plus the comfort of some old things that they were already doing, they're comfortable with, it was working fine, and they can kind of finish out the year with that. Now that doesn't mean that when you start the next year you can't change that kind of, maybe that subject out. Maybe if they were doing, you know, Saxon math in school and it was working great, you could finish out with Saxon, and then if you want to look and research to try something new the next year, go for it. I'm just saying for the remainder, the second half that you're pulling your kids out, maybe consider just using continuing on with the curriculum that was working just fine for them, just to make the curriculum or the homeschooling change a little bit less stressful on them and a little bit smoother. It's something they're familiar with. They already know how to do it. They already kind of know how it works. It's not like you're throwing a ton of new stuff at them just off of the, you know, just right out of the bat. So maybe some new things, maybe some older things, and just find things that work for your needs. And of course, like I mentioned, there's different reasons why you may have pulled your kids out. Maybe everything was working fine. They were having social situations that weren't working out. Stick with their curriculum for the rest of the year. Just make the transition as smooth as possible. The other big thing I think for transitioning to homeschooling is setting up some kind of workable daily schedule and share it with your child. If they're old enough, maybe have them help you come up with a schedule that works for them and for you. That way everybody knows what to expect, because when you're going to a more traditional school system, they already have a schedule. They go at this time, they eat snacks or lunch or whatever at this time, they have these classes, they do this homework, they come home, whatever, you know, whatever their schedule is, they have a set schedule. When you're moving into homeschooling, I think that it's also really good to at least have, it doesn't have to be super strict because you're homeschooling now, but I think it's nice, especially for the kids, that they know what to expect. So just have an outline of your day, like we're going to start school at this time, we'll probably do lunch here, if we want to do a snack we can, we're going to do these subjects, and here's your kind of just overall schedule. Now I do have daily schedule downloads you can look at per grade on my website, so you can go check those out just to get an overall idea. You don't have to follow those by any means. Maybe you're pulling your child out because the schedule was too stressful at school and they needed a little bit more freedom. Do that in your homeschooling schedule. Just still have just a basic outline of how you're going to have your day run, what it's going to look like, just so, because they're coming from such a structured environment to maybe a less structured environment, just so that they have some kind of thing to work with and to just know what their expectations are, because especially if you're pulling a child out to homeschool, they might not know what that means. They might not have any kind of clue. They might be thinking, hey, sweet, I don't even have to do school. I can lay around in my jammies all day. You know, you want to make the transition smooth. You also want to let them know that they still do have to do school. They're just doing it in a different location and potentially, you know, a different style of learning. So just having a set schedule, I think, is a good place to start. Another good thing to do is to get involved in groups. So they're coming from a more, social environment. There's lots of kids there, teachers, activities. Bringing them home to homeschool does not mean they're suddenly going to be locked in a room by themselves all day with nothing to do and no interaction with the outside world. Make sure to get them involved in different homeschooling groups or different sporting activities or music lessons or art lessons or homeschool co-op groups are a great way to do that, to meet other homeschooling families. Do field trips, get out of the house, get involved in the homeschooling community in your area. A lot of times, in a neighborhood, there'll be lots of families who homeschool, but they just don't know it. Send out a thing on your Facebook homeschool group and say, hey, we're homeschooling. Are there any groups out there, or anybody interested in joining together, once a week or something like that? Do a field trip, do a park day, maybe do a little co-op Lego group or something like that. And just get involved so that you and your child especially don't feel like you're suddenly isolated. You know, it doesn't have to be like that. Our kids do a lot of outside activities. We do a once a week options program where they go somewhere and they do a lot of different fun elective classes. They get to see friends. We do church groups. We do swimming, hockey, you know, ice skating, art classes, dance classes, whatever, piano lessons, you know, all that kind of stuff. You can still do that when you're homeschooling, and you actually have more of an option to do that because you are more flexible on your time. You can do things in the middle of the day, then you can come home and finish school, things like that. So just get involved in the homeschooling community so your student isn't feeling like they're going to be suddenly isolated. The other big thing is to allow an adjustment period. So for you and your child, there is going to be an adjustment period. There actually is one when you're starting out homeschooling anyways, even if they haven't ever been in a school system. It's just a period where they need to get used to doing school at home, learning how things run, things that may have been stressing them out at school. You know, you can alter that so that it's easier for them at home, so it just is a little bit less stressful for them, whatever it might have been. Either way, it's going to be some kind of an adjustment period. So just allow that adjustment period. Know that we might have set up this schedule. It needs to be fluid and flexible, and you know, it might not work how I thought it was going to work out. So just make sure that you're kind of being fluid with your schedule, but also allowing your student and yourself a little bit of adjustment time just to get used to homeschooling. Homeschooling takes less time. Your child can go through things quicker that they maybe were excelling at. You might have to go back a little bit and pick up on a skill level that they might have missed in school, and maybe they were behind or something. You might have to go back. Don't be afraid to go back a grade, or at least to a certain skill, and start fresh. Make sure they really get that before you're moving forward. You know, that might have been one of the reasons why you pulled them out, is because they were having academic issues in a certain subject area. So don't be afraid to tailor your curriculum and your where you start. You know, you don't have to say, okay, they're in 8th grade, so everything we're doing is this grade. You know, if they need help in a certain area, go back. If they're ahead in a certain area, go forward. You know, challenge them, give them extra help where needed. But just assume that there's going to be a little bit of an adjustment, you know, while you're getting used to where they maybe need more help, where you might need to change some things, things like that. They may also have a little bit of, you know, we're at home, I can procrastinate, I don't necessarily have to be as diligent in my work, and that's also an adjustment that we have all gone through. And just, you know, mom's my teacher now, or dad's my teacher now, so I don't have to be quite as diligent at turning things in on time and things like that. So there are some things where you're just going to have to be like, nope, we still have to do our good job, we still have to be diligent with our work, we still have to turn things in on time. Just because you're at home, it's not like a license to slack off or whatever. You know, it kind of depends on your situation, but either way, expect an adjustment period. Be flexible with that adjustment period for both you and your child, or your student, and you know, just change things as needed so that it works for you, because that's the whole purpose of you bringing them home to homeschool. And make sure to add in some fun things, so it's not like a scary, you know, like, oh, what are we doing thing. You know, do their lessons, add in field trips, add in museum trips, go to the zoo, go to the aquarium, go, you know, take a nature walk, go outside, go do school at the library. You know, make it a little bit more fun and engaging for them. It will help your transition process as well. Another thing that can help your transition process is just having your study area kind of noted in your head. They might have a desk in their room if they're older. You might have a homeschool area that they're going to be doing homeschool. You might be doing it in your kitchen. You might be doing it in the living room. Whatever it is, have kind of an area, show them where their supplies are going to be, show them what their curriculum is going to look like, where to get it, how their day is going to go. At the beginning of the year, I always do kind of like, I let everybody come in and they go through their drawers, see what they're going to be doing for the year. I kind of explain how things are going to go, you know, where supplies are if we've moved our room around. Now, half the time they're helping me set it up, and you could totally have your child do that too. Have them help you set up their area, or maybe a little desk in the kitchen, or whatever your area is like. Doesn't really matter. Just have them help you set it up so they know where things are. They know what to expect that first day. They know where to get their stuff. They know when they go to start school that day where is it on a computer? Is it in a drawer? You know, where is it? Where do I find things? All those things that they were used to before are going to be new for them now. So just have them help you organize what they want their area to look like, or whatever your space situations allow. and just kind of so they know what their day is going to look like. And we just go through that before our first day. We do like the Friday before we start or whatever. We'll just come down, everybody gets to do a little room tour and they find out where stuff is and look through their drawers, find out what they're going to be doing and all that kind of thing. That way they have just an idea in their head of what it's going to look like before you start. The other thing that I like to say, especially when you're transitioning mid-year, is to keep it simple. Don't try and add in a lot of extravagant things. You know, sometimes getting through that second half of the year that you're swapping in is just a matter of making it through the year. Like I said, you might want to just use a curriculum that they're familiar with already, just to kind of, you know, just to get through the end of that year. But keep it simple. Don't get too crazy. Don't order a ton of stuff. You're going to be overwhelmed. They're going to be overwhelmed. You know, keep it to the basics. Keep what you for sure need to do that year legally with your school district. Get that stuff. Add in some fun stuff where you feel like you can and it won't be overwhelming. But just for the most part, keep it simple for you and for your student. That way it's a learning transition year. You're just finishing out the year, getting, you know, just wrapping up that year. And then the next year you can kind of start fresh and do new things and that kind of thing. But I think just keeping it to the simple, kind of the core stuff that they need to make sure that they're doing just to get through that year will be a little bit easier of a transition than trying to add in all kinds of new, exciting, crazy things. Now, I'm not saying not to add any new fun stuff at all. That's not at all what I mean. I just mean don't go overboard with we're going to order all this stuff and, you know, do all these things and it's going to be amazing, and then you start and it's like kind of a struggle with the transition period and all that, and then you don't have time to do that, and then you feel like you wasted your money and blah, blah, blah. So just keep it simple, get the basics, change out what you need to change out, add in a few fun things here and there that are manageable, and just get through the rest of that year, and then you can start fresh with your next year. All right, so the last thing I kind of want to touch on is just extracurricular activities. Now, I kind of briefly mentioned that when you have a child coming home from a public or traditional school setting, they can kind of be feeling maybe a little anxious about coming home because they're worried about maybe being sort of isolated and not being able to see their friends anymore. And in some cases, that's a good thing. You may have had some social issues and, you know, they don't want to see those people anymore, and that's fine. But I do think it's important to just get your child involved in some extracurricular activities outside of your homeschooling situation. So, you know, maybe that could be a sport that they enjoy. That could be like music lessons or choir lessons, or maybe an art lesson or art class or something from like a local rec center. You know, anything like that. That just kind of gets them out still and not feeling so isolated, but they're still getting to do fun things that they enjoy. Plus, it's kind of an incentive if you're bringing them home and they're uncertain about it, that they're going to also be able to not only get their schooling done, but they're also going to get to do some fun other things on the side. So that might mean in-school things like field trips and things like that, but I also suggest things extracurricular outside of school, after school, whatever. Dance lessons or play dates with other, you know, their old friends. You know, you can still try and do play dates. Find friends in the neighborhood that might also be homeschooling that you can kind of schedule play dates with and things like that, just to kind of keep them involved and having fun. But knowing that when you homeschool, a lot of people, it's a misconception that, you know, homeschoolers are just unsocialized, and I'm not going to do a whole video on that because it's just goofy, but they're not. There are so many options for you to just get out and get your kids involved in things, and especially if you're homeschooling, you tend to have a little bit more time for those things. You don't have as much time spent on homework and at school as you do when you're in a traditional school setting. So you have time for things like field trips and, you know, sports activities and crafting activities and play dates with friends and things like that. So I do suggest that you just make a conscious effort to do things like that as well, just so that your child isn't feeling so isolated, but also just to give them something to look forward to as you're transitioning them to homeschooling as well. If they know that they are homeschooling, but they're also going to get to do, you know, whatever, hockey or something that might have taken too much time up before when they were in traditional school, now they can do that. You know, that's definitely an incentive for them to be able to get to do something fun. So those are my tips on transitioning from a public or traditional school setting to a homeschooling setting mid-year. It's totally doable. I just suggest that you try and do as much planning ahead and communicating with your child as you can to make the transition smooth. And like I said, keep the curriculum kind of simple. Don't get too extravagant and crazy. Just keep the transition as smooth as you can for the rest of that year. Get through the end of that year. Then you have all summer to figure out what you want to do for the upcoming year. You can talk to your kids, see what they're interested in. You can note what wasn't working, what you think will work, and do all your research and all of that for the following year. But just to transition out of that year, I think keeping it as simple as possible and as smooth as possible is the best way to go. So if you have any tips and you've gone through this yourself and you have tips for transitioning from traditional school to a homeschool situation mid-year, please make sure to leave a comment below so that other people can glean from your experience as well. I'm sure I did not mention everything, so but those are just my tips on making the transition a little bit smoother for everybody involved. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it helped you out. If you have any questions, you're welcome to email me. I'll put all of my information below. I hope you enjoyed this Tip Tuesday, and I will see you next time.